Good morning, everybody. Today is Shabbos, Daf Kuf Beis Amid Beis and Kuf Gimel. So we'll begin from the top of Kuf Beis Amid Beis, 102b1, new parak. Habayna. So now we're going to continue with the minimum amounts. So we spent a lot of time regarding the halachas of hoitzah, carrying. Let's move on to other malachos. Now, how do we get into building? Some of the commentaries say if you work backwards, so hotzah, carrying is the last one. The one before that is a makab patish, the final hammer blow. In order to get to the final hammer blow, you have to build first, and then you get the final hammer blow. So that's how some say we got to building over here. So Abayna is somebody who builds. Kama yivne v'hei chayiv. How much should he build and be liable? Abayna kolshu. It goes with whatever, any amount that a person builds would make him liable. So even though we've had by carrying sometimes the size of a dried fig and other measures, by building, any minimum amount of building is constructive. Vahamisates. Somebody who chisels a stone, which is he squares off a stone and prepares it for building with a local custom, either smooths its sides or carving decorative grooves in it, the Rashi and others say. Somebody who strikes the final blow with a hammer or with a sledgehammer, or, so this is makab patish, hakodeach. Somebody drills a hole, so he bores a hole in the wood or stone of a wall, Rashi says, kolshu, any amount, chayiv would be liable. Zaklal, this is a rule. Kol ha'oisa malacha, mulachtim iskamas. Anybody who does malacha, and the labor will endure the Shabbos, if you do it on Shabbos, chayiv, he would be liable. Rishim Gamliel says, af hamakeh bekornus al hasadon b'shas malacha chayiv. Also, somebody who strikes with a hammer on the anvil while working is liable. Because it's like somebody who improves the work. So here, even when the smith is not striking the utensil that he's working, but rather he strikes the anvil, if he strikes the anvil while he's working on the utensil, that blow alone to the anvil is constructive. We'll see in the Gemara how it's constructive. And you are liable for that.
No.
Okay, so that's the Mishnah. Gary, can you hear me? Gary?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so you could talk now. So I know yesterday you said you had questions. I don't know what the issue was, but it seems like everything's working. Just mute yourself.
Good.
As long as you mute yourself, you should be able to unmute yourself afterwards.
Okay.
All right?
Yes.
Okay, hopefully that'll work. I tried calling you back yesterday, Gary. I couldn't get through to you, though. Just letting you know. Okay. So let's analyze this Mishnah. Kol shehu l'may chazia. Remember, anytime you want to be liable for malacha, biblically liable, it has to be a constructive malacha. So if you build even a teeny amount, what does that accomplish exactly? Rabbi Yirmiyah says, "Shekain ani chayfer guma." Well, a pauper would dig a small hole, lehatzniya ba'prutosav, to store his copper coins in it. Now, if you dig a small hole, what malacha is that? Digging a small hole in the ground, what malacha is that?
Bona.
So the answer is, very politically correct answer, is that it depends. What does it depend on? We like very politically correct answers, right? So it depends where you do it. If you do it in your house, then Steve is correct. It's bona. If you do it outside, then what's malacha?
Plowing or something?
Plowing, chorish, right? Okay. So, however, we do see, since if you do it inside, it would be building. So, therefore, we have an example already where building even a minute amount is constructive. Because a pauper would dig a small hole to store his copper coins in it. The kavas agav mishkan, we find by the Mishkan as well, because those who sewed the curtains for the Mishkan would sometimes dig a small hole, and to store their needles in it until they would use them again. Abaye Amar, however, Abaye disagrees with this. He says, hold on a second. If you put needles in the ground, they're going to rust. You wouldn't do that. The Abaye Amar says, since they're going to rust, they would not do that by the building of the Mishkan. Ella, rather, a pauper crafts a stand for a small stove. We're now on 102b2. Lishbais allow Kederektana to set on it a small pot of food. So he only has a tiny earthenware stove that he heats his little pot of food. He builds a miniature iron tripod for the stove, Rashi says, which is a teeny amount of building. The Kavasig Mishkan, the similar case we have by the Mishkan, those who cooked the herbs to dye the curtains, if they were missing some dye from their work, they would craft a stand for a small stove, to set up on it a small kettle of dye. So that's how even a minimum amount of building is considered constructive. Rav Yaakov says, we have an expression that we use often by the Beis Mikdash. You don't have poverty in a place of opulence. So the whole goal of the Mishkan and the Beis Mikdash was to show the opulence. It was a Hashem's palace. So you can't start bringing measures of what a poor person would do. It doesn't sound right. Why do we have examples of poverty over there? So we need another example of how building is constructive, not necessarily for a pauper. Rather, let's say a homeowner who has a hole in the wall of his mansion will just seal it with clay, which is bona. That's building, because now you just built the wall. The Kavasigav Mishkan, a similar case by the Mishkan, Shekain Keresh Nafal by Darnam, if you have a plank that has a worm fell in it and bored a hole in the plank, they're not going to necessarily replace the whole plank. Rather, the craftsman would pour molten lead into the hole and seal it. So that's how we have by both the Mishkan and in current events, we have examples of how even a teeny amount of building is considered constructive, and therefore you're liable for that. Okay, Amr Shmuel said, somebody who positions a stone in the ground would be liable. So he sets a stone in the ground and works it into the ground until it's level and held firmly in place. He's liable just for that. Even with no cement, he has done a minimal act of building, because now the stone can serve as a foundation, and sometimes people will use foundations even without cementing them. So just positioning that stone in the ground, Shmuel says that's a biblical malacha of bona, of building. Mesa challenges from Brisa, the Brisa says one person sets a stone in place to build a wall. Another one adds a cement. So these are Mishayas that talk, or Brisa that talk about if two people do malacha, which one's liable. And the one that really makes it constructive is the one that's liable. So here we have, if one sets the stone in place and one adds a cement, the one who adds the cement is considered like he did the constructive act, because he's the one that now made it that you can use it for the building. So what do we see? Just placing a stone is not considered constructive enough to make you liable. The Gemara says back, according to your reasoning, Ema Sefer. Let's look at the end of that same brisa. Rabbi Yossi says, even if somebody just lifted a stone and placed it on top of a row of stones, he's liable just for that. Now that's not even positioning it firmly in the ground. So that's even more like stringent to make you liable. So how does this work? There's actually 3 stages in building a wall, which Shmuel was addressing one stage, the beginning of the Brisa was addressing a second stage, and Rabbi Yossi was addressing a third stage. What is the 3 stages? Tata, Mitzia, Ve'ila, the bottom row stones, the middle row stones, and the top row stones. The bottom row needs positioning and wedging nerve. That's already constructive. Middle row needs cement to hold it in place. Now the top row does not have to be as perfect as the middle two, because the top row is not holding anything else in position, and therefore the top row Just placing it there suffices. So basically, the foundation does not need to be cemented, but it has to be wedged in. The middle needs to be cemented, and the top, just positioning it is already constructive. And therefore, whatever is constructive for this layer that you're putting it in, that would make you liable. Okay, so comes out Shmuel is not contradicting the brisa. He's just referring to different stage of the construction than the brisa is. Okay, then the Mishnah continues, V'hamasates. Somebody who chisels a stone is liable to a biblical malacha. Which malacha is chiseling a stone? Misates, mishum ma'am chayiv. So what malacha is that? Now, just a record, what's the difference? What's the nafka mina? What's the practical difference which malacha something is? Meaning, we know that you're biblically liable. It says that in the Mishnah, right? So what's the difference? Is there any practical difference if we know which malacha it is? So there's at least two big nafkaminas. One of them would be, yes, Steve?
If you do the second one.
What do you mean?
Well, if it's the same malacha or a different malacha.
You mean in one lapse of awareness?
Yeah.
Very good. We've seen if you do the same malacha or malacha and it's told, according to those opinions, not like Rabbi Eliezer, in one lapse of awareness, you're only liable to one. If you do two different malachas, you're liable to two. Excellent. Another nafkamina would be, in order to kill somebody, right, we have to warn them. In order to warn them, we have to tell them what they're doing wrong. So both regarding, if you warn them from the wrong malacha, you can't kill them afterwards. So if you warn them and say, if you chisel this stone, you're doing makeh b'patish, and we're going to get you killed. And guy's like, I know, and I'm still doing it. And as you're taking him out to court, his lawyer says, hold on a second. I'm pretty sure the Gemara says it's not makeh b'patish, it's bona. All of a sudden, he's not getting death penalty. So you have to warn him with the right malacha. That's regarding deliberate. And regarding inadvertent, as Steve said, if you do a malacha and it's tolda, according to most opinions, or if you do malacha and it's tolda, you're only liable to one in one lapse of awareness, as opposed to two different malachas too. So we have to always know not just whether something's forbidden, but we must know exactly what's wrong with it. So misates mishumai mechayev. So when the Mishnah says that chiseling a stone is biblically liable, what malacha is that? Rav Amar Misham Boina. Rav says you're liable on account of building. Shmuel Amar Misham Makeh b'patish. Shmuel says it's the final hammer blow. So basically, Rav holds since the chiseler is preparing the stone for construction, so that's part of construction. Construction is building. That's bona. Shmuel says since chiseling the stone is its final preparation to be able to use it, that's the case of striking the final blow. And even if you just chisel a single groove in a stone, any amount, that's a final blow in that part of the stone, Rashi says. Okay, so we have a major machlokas over here. We're going to actually see three cases over now where Shmuel and Rav will argue vehemently about what malacha something falls into. Rav will say it's building, and Shmuel will say that it's makeh b'patish, the final hammer blow. Okay, so the first one is regarding chiseling a stone. The second case, somebody who makes a hole in a chicken coop. So here you have a wooden coop that has no windows, and you need to make perforations near the top so the fumes generated by the droppings will escape and not harm the chickens, Rashi says. So making that hole, what is that? Rav Amar Mishum Bainam. Rav says that's building. You're building a constructive chicken coop. Shmuel said it's a final hammer blow because that's the final step to making the chicken coop. So any final step, it falls under makeh b'patish. Third case they argue about. We're now on 102b3. Ayel shufta bekufina demara. Somebody who wedged a peg in the cavity of a hoe. So basically the metal part of a hoe has a cavity that which a wooden handle was fitted into. After the handle was inserted, a peg will be wedged into the cavity to prevent the handle from slipping out, Rashi says. So when you wedge that in, the peg in, what malacha is that? Rav Amar Mishum Baina. Rav says that's building. Shmuel Amar Makeh b'patish. Shmuel says it's a final hammer blow. Taisus has a lot of problems with this because we do have a rule, which is a very complicated rule, which is ein binyan v'stir b'kelim, that the concepts of building and demolishing do not apply to utensils. So here you have a hoe, which is utensil, seemingly the concept of building should not apply, and they give different answers for that. But basically, it's not a simple rule. So it is a rule that is often quoted by the Halachas of Shabbos, that ain't binim sirikelim, that the words of building the mashing don't apply, but it's not so simple. And they talk about that. Yes, Steve?
I can't resist. When he wedges the wedge in the hole, does he use a hammer to knock it in?
What do you mean?
Well, then wouldn't that then be makeh b'patish?
I hear, yes. It could be literally makeh b'patish, but it may not fall under the molacha of makeh b'patish. But yes, good point. For example, if you take a hammer and you start you smash your cement on Shabbos, right? And there's nothing constructive about that. You are literally makeh b'patish, hitting with a hammer, but that may not be the molacha of makeh b'patish. Yes, thank you for pulling that one. Okay. So Rav says, again, when you wedge the peg in the cavity of the hoe that's building, Shmuel says makeh. So we have three cases that Rav and Shmuel are arguing about. Would it suffice for them to say one case, or do they need to argue about all three? So again, what are the three cases? The first one is chiseling a stone. The second case was making a hole. Andy, what are you doing? What is that?
This is a little thing that when my family was young, we went to Busch Gardens, and there's a whole picture of my little family. And you look at it up in the light. I do that every morning to remember where I came from.
Where do you come from?
From a family of small children.
Oh, okay.
You'll do that too. You'll like to remember that too once you get my age and you don't have small children again. You like to remember when you had little babies.
Oh, very nice. All right. Just curious. You got my attention there. Okay. So, Utzricha. So, we need all three cases to see the Machlokas, Rav, and Shmuel. Di'iyashmin and Kamaisa. If we only had the first Machlokas by the chiseling the stone, maybe only in that case Rav says that's bona, that's building. Because that's the usual manner of building, which means the standard construction of a house calls for the stones to be prepared by chiseling. Somebody makes a hole in a chicken coop. That's what I thought got your attention, Andy, because I know you used to have a chicken coop. So, somebody makes a hole in a chicken coop, which is not the usual manner of building. Standard buildings did not have small perforations designed to let fumes escape, like the case of the hole in a chicken coop. They had doors and windows, which people and objects can pass in and out. So the concept of making a hole for fumes to escape is not a standard concept in the rules of building. Maybe he would agree to Shmuel that might be more of a makeh b'patish issue, of a final hammer blow, more than a building issue, because that's not the normal way of building. And if we only have the second case that they argued, maybe only that case Rav says that that's building, because maybe at least making a hole in chicken coop is similar to building, because you're making a hole for ventilation. But wedging a peg in the cavity of a hole, which seemingly is not similar to any manner of building, maybe Rob would agree to Shmuel that case would be makeh b'patish, not building. And we only have the case regarding the last case, which was the peg in the hoe. Maybe that case Shmuel says that's makeh b'patish, because that's not similar to building. But the first two cases, maybe Shmuel would agree to Rav that it's building. Tzricha therefore has teach us machlokas by all three cases. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Next, Rav Nasin bar Oshia mi Rav Yochanan. Rav Nasin bar Oshia and Rav Yochanan. Misates mishum mai mechayev. So he asked him, what av malach, what primary category is chiseling liable? So again, if I ask you all rabbis, chiseling a stone, what malacha is that? What would you tell me?
Building.
It's machlokas.
That's what we're talking about.
Thank you. Right? Rav says building and Shmuel says makeh b'patish. So Rav Nasin bar Oshia asked Rav Yochanan, what malacha is chiseling? So you know what he did? He went like this. What did he answer him?
Final blow.
What?
Final blow.
Hitting with a hammer, right?
Uh-huh.
So,
Paper hammer.
Is that being some kind of not being disrespectful, not saying it or something?
why waste words if you can demonstrate? Picture is worth 1,000 words, no? So he showed him with his hands. He's like, it's like the final hammer blow. That's all he did. That was his answer. Frakta Gemara, Vahanantan, Vahamasatis, Vihamakvapatish. Ramnasan Ba'oshi objected to this. He said, hold on a second. If you look at the Mishnah has two separate cases. It says you're liable if you do chiseling or if you do the final hammer blow. Right? It says Vahamasatis, Vihamakvapatish. So the Mishnah lists them separately. Sounds like chiseling is not makabipatish, right? If you list them separately, that means they're not the same thing. But not then hamasatis via makabipatish. A hamasatis hamakabipatish. So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, that's not how you're supposed to read the Mishnah. Rather, you read it as the one who chisels a stone is the one who strikes the final hammer blow. Meaning it's one case. Chiseling a stone is makabipatish. So so there's two ways to read the Mishnah. According to Rav, it's two separate cases. We know chiseling is bona, is building, and then you have makapatish. And according to Shmuel, which is how Rabbi Yochanan wanted to understand, is that the chiseler is the makapatish. Tashima. Now let's try to bring another proof against it. So we have now Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel hold that chiseling the stone is makapatish, and Rav says that it's bona. Tashima. Let's try to refute Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel. Hakodeach kol shahu chayiv. So the Mishnah says, somebody who drills any amount is liable. We're now on 103A1, Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph. Okay, so drilling is any amount is liable. Now, seemingly when you drill, you intend to drive something into the hole, right? So you're not just making a hole. Making a hole would be no cave. No cave is making a hole. Kodeach means you're boring a hole because you want to put something into it. So Bishamala Rav, this is good according to Rav, who says that making a hole in a chicken coop is liable because that's bona machzik command dechar chortul levinyano. So then in this case also, of the one who drills any amount is liable, it looks like you're drilling a hole for the benefit of the building. So since Rav holds that making a hole in a chicken coop is a minimal amount of minimal act of building. So it stands to reason drilling a small hole in a house is also an act of building. And even though something still needs to be driven into the hole, the drilling itself is a worthwhile improvement to the house, and therefore that would qualify as binyan, bona. El Shmuel, but Shmuel said if you make a hole in a chicken coop, you're not liable for building. It's only the final hammer blow, right? But lav gemar malachahu. But if you're boring a hole in a house because you need to put something else into the hole, that means you're not doing the final act. The final hammer blow is the final step in completing something. So when you bore a hole in something, according to Rav, that's beautiful or you're liable, because bona, building, does not require it to be the final act. But according to Shmuel, that boring a hole fits under makbet patish. If the goal of the boring the hole is to do something else to complete this, that shouldn't be makbet patish. So why would you be liable? Lav gemar malachu, it's not the final act. So Gemara says, "Hach ma'askina." You know what we're talking about over here? Debaze beramtza de farzula. The person pierced the wall with a long iron nail. Bishavke big gave, and he left the nail in the wall to hang things on it. The hainu gemar malacha. So there, that same boring of the hole, if you pierce the wall with a nail and you keep the nail in it, that is the final act because now you're boring the hole, gave you something to hang things on. So that's how it's a final act. Okay, so it comes out there's a big nafkamina between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says that we're dealing with bona issues. That does not need to be the final stage. Because building, any step in the building would make you liable. As opposed to Shmuel that calls all these liable on account of maku patish, it's got to be the final stage. Okay, then the Mishnah says, Zakla, this is the rule. Anybody who does malach and his labor endures in Shabbos, he is liable. What is this rule of the Mishnah coming to include? Coming to include somebody who hollowed out a cavity that can contain a kafiza. A kafiza is a measure, which is 3/4 of a kav, which was a measure they had. So he hollowed out a cavity that can contain the amount of a kafiza, 3/4 of a kav, and a block that's large enough to hold a kav. So the block is large enough to have a kav size hollow carved into it, but he only carved out 3/4 of it. So even though he didn't finish carving all that he intends to, he's still liable for the amount that he carved, since some people would leave it like that. But that's what we're saying. Since it's something that can endure like this, and some people do like that, you'd be liable just for that 3/4. Okay, Shimon Gamalo says, Hamakib bekurnas al asadan v'chulu, somebody who strikes with a hammer on the anvil while he's working is liable. So what malacha is that? My ka'abed, what is he doing? He's not striking the object. He's striking the anvil. So what did he do? He's training his hand to hammer properly. So he's training himself to hammer properly when he does the hammering on the anvil. So that would be the malacha. Rashi says he's practicing bringing the hammer down with a precise force required for that particular work. Kashuba b'nei Rechava, the sons of Rechava had a difficulty with this. According to this, Chaza umnusa b'Shabbat v'Gomer. If somebody observed the performance of a craft on Shabbos and he learned it, does that make you liable? Usually you have to actually accomplish something, not just learning how to do it. So if your whole goal in striking the anvil is to train your hand, training your hand is not a malacha. So if I learn a profession on Shabbos, it may not be a Shabbos in the spirit of Shabbos, but what malacha did I do? Is it training my hand? That's not a malacha. So if you just train in how to do a craft, you have to do something constructive. That's not a malacha. So again, what malacha is it when you're striking the anvil during the time when you're working? Rather, those who pounded the sheets of gold for the Mishkan would do this, which means we know the wooden planks in the Mishkan were covered with sheets of gold. So the smiths would hammer the gold into thin sheets. They would strike the hammer once on the anvil after every 3 strikes on the sheet to ensure that the surface of the hammer would remain smooth and not puncture the sheet, Rashi says. Rashi says the coin manufacturers in his location actually had this practice as well. So the malacha is smoothing the hammer. What does the Tana Kama hold? Meaning this is a Rishon Gamliel's opinion. So he does not dispute this, that the smiths would strike the anvil, the hammers, when being the sheets. But he holds that's not included in striking the final blow since it's done during the work. However, the Tana Kama would agree when the smith strikes the anvil one last time after finishing his work to smooth out the hammer, that would be the final blow. But if you're doing it during the malacha, you can't call it the final blow because it's still in the middle of it. Okay? Tananami Halchi will like this advice as well. Shimon says, also somebody who strikes with a hammer on the anvil while working is liable. To those who pounded the sheets of the gold for the Mishkan would do this. Yes, Steve.
What about a musical instrument? When the sound does not endure.
You asking about playing an instrument or fixing an instrument?
Playing.
Playing an instrument, I do not believe is a biblical malacha. It's only rabbinic.
Okay.
I will get to it. I believe that playing an instrument is a rabbinic decree that you might come to fix the instrument, and because it's common that instruments break while you're playing them, so you might come to fix it, and if you fix it, that will be a biblical malacha. But the actual playing, I do not believe is anything biblical that I'm aware of. Okay. All right, next Mishnah. HaChoyresh. Let's move on to plowing. HaChoyresh kol shehum. Now, how do we get to plowing? So we know there's lots of connections between building and plowing. We know that building generally consists of filling up holes or augmenting a structure. Plowing is digging holes or diminishing that which is already there. And they're very similar. Plus, we've had that. If you make a hole, you can if it's inside the house, it's building. If it's outside the house, it's plowing. So there's a lot of commonalities between building and plowing. So a choyrish kolshu, somebody plows any amount, would be liable. Hamenakesh, someone who pulls out weeds from between plants, which cause the remaining plants to grow better. That will actually be a subcategory of zareya, of planting. So weeding is a subcategory of planting because you're making the surrounding plants grow better. V'hamikarsem, somebody who prunes dry branches. So he cuts dry branches from a tree to improve the tree, Rashi says. V'hamizared, somebody who prunes young shoots. So he prunes the excess young shoots that due to their abundance diminish the strength of the tree. These are similar to sowing, meaning like planting, because they stimulate the tree's growth. Kol shu, any amount chayav would be liable. Hamalakid eitzim, somebody who gathers wood by cutting branches off a live tree. So here it depends on your intent. Imlas sakin, is your goal in gathering these branches is to improve the tree or the fertility of the surrounding soil, kol shehen. So then the malacha is sowing, right? Because you're improving growth falls under sowing or planting. And we've already learned that sowing or planting, any amount makes you liable. So if your goal in cutting off the branches is to improve the tree, that's a subcategory of sowing. So therefore you're liable any amount. Im lahasik, if the reason why you're cutting off these branches is not to improve the tree, but it's because you want wood for kindling. So then the malacha there is the reaping, which is kotzer. So it's a totally different malacha. So then we have a different measure for that. So k'dei lavashal beitza kala. So then you're liable for the measure of wood required to cook an easily cooked egg, which we've seen before about. Okay. Mm-hmm. So here you actually have something. You have an act that theoretically could be sowing, plowing, or reaping. And it comes out based on your intention is how we're going to nail you for it, or what malacha you're going to have done. Okay. By the way, we've seen that the easily cooked egg is a hen's egg. We've also seen it's not the amount to cook the whole egg, but to cook the volume of a dried fig of an egg. Hamalakir asavim, somebody who gathers grasses. Meiri says, and he's uprooting growing grasses. In Lasakin, if your goal is to improve the soil, so that's a malacha of zareya, of sowing. So then we know kolshu, any amount will be liable. Im lebehema, if your intent is to use the grass for animal fodder, so then that's a malacha of kotzer, of harvesting or reaping. Kumlai pi hagadi. So then the amount that's significant is a measure for a kid's mouthful. Okay, that's the smallest animal that you would regularly feed grass to. Okay, so it's very important now to really understand what you're doing. So if you just call up your rabbi and say, Rabbi, if I cut a branch off my tree on Shabbos, what malacha is that? What's the answer?
What's your intent?
Depends what it's for, right? If your goal is to make the tree grow better, that falls under zareya, sowing. If your goal is because you want to make a bonfire and you want to cook an egg or a marshmallow, so then it's a different malacha. And not only is it nafkamina what malacha is it, but it's also nafkamina how much is a minimal amount that would make you liable. So we really have to be sharp and trying to really analyze what a person is doing exactly. Okay. So
Rabbi,
yes.
if you cut limbs off of a tree for fuel to cook something with, what malacha is that? That's what malacha. I'm not talking about using the fuel. I'm talking about using it in the future.
That's harvesting.
Oh, okay.
When you harvest, you're cutting something to use it.
You're right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's start with plowing. So we said a minimal amount of plowing is liable. Lamai chazi, what is that? What can you do with a teeny amount of plowing? Meaning, usually when you plow a large amount, not a teeny amount. The Gemara says, chazi lebezer dekara. It's fit for planting a pumpkin seed. The kavas gavi mishkan, and we have a similar case by the Mishkan. She can roy lekalach achashal samanim. You could dig a teeny furrow to plant one stalk of an herb for the production of a dye. Okay. Now, haminakesh v'im, just a record, the commentaries have a lot of fun with this Gemara as well, because we learned on the Gemara on Daf Tzadi, on Daf 90, that for carrying, you're not liable until you carry at least 2 pumpkin seeds into public domain, because nobody's going to bother to plant 1 pumpkin seed. So why is, when it comes to choresh, to plowing, we said even 1 pumpkin seed is considered significant, the amount to plant 1, but we said when it comes to transferring, you're only liable if you carry out 2 pumpkin seeds. What's going on over here? So regarding plowing, each hole needs to be dug individually in order to plant the seed. Meaning so this is what the commentary is saying. It's different, they have a lot of fun with this. So one answer is when you're transferring, in that one act of transferring, you're going to carry at least 2 seeds to be a significant act of transferring, right? As opposed to when you plow, you're going to need to dig each hole individually. That means each hole has significance. Even though you'll plow an entire furrow one time, that's actually considered a sequence of separate events, the commentators say. You dug one hole and then another hole, then another hole. So it's interesting. So again, so it comes to carrying, nobody's going to carry out 1 seed to plant. So there it's only significant if you carry out at least 2 pumpkin seeds. And regarding other seeds, you may need more than 2. When it comes to plowing, you need to plow each hole. You're not plowing 2 holes the exact same second. Even 2 holes is one and then the other. So therefore 1 hole is significant. Okay, Hamenakesh, somebody who weeds. V'hamekarsem, somebody who prunes dry branches. V'hamezaret, somebody who prunes young shoots, is liable for any amount. Tanarba and Braisa, hatoilesh aylashin, somebody who plucks endives. V'hamezaret zeradim, or prunes seeds. So like this, what's your goal? Im la'achila, if your goal is for human consumption, kigra garas, so then you're only liable for uprooting the size of a measure of a dried fig, because your goal is to eat it. So when it comes to eating, it's only a significant amount of a dry fig. Im levehema, if it's for your animal fodder, so kimloi piagadi, then it goes by the measure of a kid's mouthful. Im lahasik, if your intent is for kindling, kedelavashal beit sakala, so then it goes by measure required to cook an easily cooked egg, or at least a dried fig's amount. Im liyabus is a karka, if your goal is to improve the ground, kolshin any amount. So it comes out, one act can be 4 different significances, if that's the right word. It can have 4 different types of significance depending on what your intent is, which also makes a difference what malacha is and what the measure will be. So you could do it for your own eating. You could do it for your animals eating, which would both be reaping. Or it could be you did it for firewood, which would also be reaping, but a different measure. All 3 of these are different measures. Or it could be you just did it to make the ground better, which would then be a totally different malacha, which would be zareya, and then it goes by any amount. Don't they, at the end of the day, if I'm weeding, and my goal is because I want these weeds, these grasses for me to eat. At the end of the day, I'm also improving the ground, am I not? So shouldn't I also be liable on account of sowing? Now sowing is liable in any amount, right? So while we're saying it's only if I take out enough weeds for grasses for me to eat, or let's say it's endives or something, or to feed to my goat, which is a larger amount, as soon as I did a teeny amount, I'm liable because I already improved the land. So who cares if my intent is for me to eat it? The end of the day, I constructively made my land better. Why is that not sowing? So you're right, it depends on the situation. If it's also improving your land, you're right. So then that would be 2 malachas. That would be harvesting, and it would be sowing. And then you'd already be liable for a teeny amount on account of sowing. But there will be cases where you don't care about the improvement of the land. For example, let's say you did it in a swamp. So you go to a swamp and you start pulling out weeds, right? So that's not sowing because you couldn't care less about the land. So that's when we say, what's it for? Is it for you to eat or for your animal to eat? So again, we're talking about a swamp where the whole concept of improving the land doesn't really apply, and that's why that's not a Zoreya issue. Abai says, I can work it out even in a field, which is not a swamp. However, the case is talking about where it was not your intent. Abai says, let's just say it's in a field, but if my intent is not to improve the field, my intent is only for me to eat it or for my animal to eat it, that's why you're liable on account of harvesting, not on account of Zareh of sowing, because that was not my intent. Frakta Gemara, Abai Rava to Amr Tavah, but Abai and Rava both say, so let's just say it's not your intent. So what would that be? That would be a davar shein miskavin, right? Which means you're doing an act, and it's not your intent to do this malacha, a different malacha, So we know that's a machlokas or Yehuda and Shimon, whether a malacha shem is kavin. If you're accomplishing a malacha, but it's not your intent to do that malacha, whether you're liable. And we pass like Reb Shimon that it's permitted. But even Reb Shimon agrees if it's for sure going to happen, that's called a psik reisha. Literally means if you chop off the head of a chicken, it's going to die. If it's for sure going to happen, even Reb Shimon holds it's forbidden. Now, if you are pulling out weeds in your field, and even if your intent is to feed it to your goats, at the end of the day, it is for sure improving your field. So everybody should agree that that's forbidden. So why? So, and then you should be liable already for a teeny amount. So again, Rabbi and Rav both say, Rav Shimon agrees by an inevitable consequence. Just like if you chop off the head of a chicken, it's for sure going to die. So too, if you have an inevitable consequence that a malacha will happen, that's viewed as if you did that malacha. So this case should still be liable on account of sowing. The Gemara says, the Bryce talking about where you did it in your friend's field. So in your friend's field, yes, it will improve the land, but you couldn't care less. It has no benefit for you, and therefore that would be called a psik reisha delay nichole. It's for sure going to happen, but you couldn't care less about it, and for that you would not be liable. So this is a very important Gemara over here. So we now have a concept where you can have a psik reisha, the case of a davar she'emes kavin, where it's not, you have an unintended malacha happening, even if it's for sure going to happen. But if you couldn't care less if it happens, then we see in our Gemara you're not going to be liable for that. I'm just going to read note 23 here. This is very important. It happens to have a lot of practical ramifications. The concept of a psik reisha delay nichole. If you do something and it's going to have an inevitable consequence, but you couldn't care less about the consequence, how our Gemara seems to be saying that that's okay, which is a big discussion. It's like this. Note 23. According to this explanation, Rav Shimon does not hold a person liable for an unintended, inevitable consequence of his act if he does not benefit from the consequence or care if it occurs. Okay? Taisvus cites the view of the Aruch. There's a famous opinion that it is even permissible in the first place to perform an act that will have an unintended, inevitable consequence from which one will not benefit and for which he does not care. That's the Aruch's opinion. Just a record, you want an example of this? This was Carrie's case of opening his oven on Friday nights. If you know by opening the oven, it will cause the fire to go on, or it will cause the heating element to go on. But he takes out all the food before he closes it, actually that case might be more complicated, but they do talk about it by that case, where you're going to cause the heating element to go on, but you have no benefit from it because you're taking out the food before you close the oven again. So that would be an example, which is not so simple, but that's one of the cases where they talk about a psik reisha, delay nichole, where you'll have an inevitable consequence, which you don't want. It means when he opens his oven door to take out his food Friday night, it's not his goal to turn on the fire at all. Okay? So it's a davar she'emes kavin. His intent is not to turn on the fire. And it's like this: if he still keeps food in because he's going to take out the first course now and take out the second course later, that's going to call it psik reisha de nichole, an inevitable consequence that is pleasing to him, and that for sure would be a problem if the oven's because he might be if he's making the oven go on. But if he takes out all the food now, so that might be a psik reisha delay nichole. Because he couldn't care less if it goes on because he has no more food in there. I'm not giving a bottom line ruling on the case because it may depend on other factors as well, but I'm just giving an example of where psik reisha de nichole or delay nichole might make a difference if it's pleasing to him or he couldn't care less about it. Let me just finish this paragraph. Yes, Steve?
Are we differentiating when you say it doesn't benefit you? Is the you a generic you, or is it you specifically the person who does the action?
Well, that's a good question. So the Gemara here says that you did it in your friend's field. So at least from the Gemara's standpoint, it sounds like it may be benefiting your friend, but since it doesn't benefit you, it sounds like that's why it's okay. I'm not giving you a bottom line answer because if you want a bottom line halacha, these are extremely complicated. And we'll see right now, there's many different opinions here. But if you just, from the Gemara's case, it actually benefits your friend, just not you. Just a record as well, there's another discussion. Some say to be called psikaration delay nichale, to get all the leniencies, it has to be you don't want it to happen. Versus, I don't care if it happens. Meaning, if you don't want it to happen, that then makes things a little bit better than just not caring if it happens as well. But let me finish this paragraph here. Okay, so again, so you have the aruch which holds that a psikaration delay nichale, an inevitable consequence, which is not your goal. So you're trying to do A, but B happens. So you're trying to take your food out of the oven, but the oven light goes on, right? So that's an inevitable consequence, but it's not my goal at all. So the aruch holds, if it's loy nichale, if you couldn't care less if that happens. So you have a combination of the fact it's not my goal when I do this act. I'm doing a different act, but this will happen. And I couldn't care less if it happens. The aruch says, no problem, go ahead. It's okay, according to the aruch. However, Tosfos and other Rishonim disagree with the aruch, stating that such an act is forbidden in the first place due to the inevitability of the forbidden consequence, even though the inevitable consequence will provide no benefit. They explain that our Gemara excludes a person only from liability after the fact from the consequence that is not beneficial to him. The reason is that since the consequential labor provides no benefit, it is a malacha performed not for its defined purpose. So here we also get into the concept of malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. If you do an act, but you don't benefit from it, remember a case of carrying out the corpse from your house, where usually when you carry something from A to B, your goal is to get it to B. But here, your goal is just, I don't want it here, right? So once you get the psikaration delay nichale, it's also malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. You do an act which I couldn't care less about the malacha happening. This type of act does not engender liability, but is nevertheless prohibited under rabbinic law. So again, case of psikaration delay nichale, which is you do A and you know that B will happen, but it's not my goal for B and I couldn't care less if B happens. According to the aruch, quoted by Tosfos, there is no problem with that. According to many other commentaries, it knocks it down from biblical to rabbinic, but it's still going to be rabbinically forbidden, unless you can combine it with some other factors. Sometimes rabbis will combine a few different factors to make things permitted. If it's a pressing need, and it's a specific ratio, and then gufa, sometimes you can make combinations. If you have a few different things that are only rabbinic, putting them on top of each other, you can permit it. So again, this is the starting point. This is not meant as a bottom line halachic ruling at all, but I just want you to understand a little bit where these questions that rabbis deal with come from. This is relevant to drinking from a water fountain on Shabbos, depending on what happens. Again, if the motor goes on, but it's not your goal, it could be relevant to opening your fridge on Shabbos. Now we're not talking about when there's direct cause and effect. That makes things worse. But for example, sometimes it's only a maybe if it will happen. So there you can get the Darvish and Muskavin where it's not psik ratio. For example, if you open your fridge and there's no light that for sure goes on, definitely you don't want it to be that there's any direct cause and effect. So when you open your fridge, you don't want it. You can't open if you know it's going to turn on the light. But let's say you don't know where in the motorcycle and the cycle of the motorcycle it's in. So sometimes when you open your fridge, it will make the motor go on, right? Sometimes it will only make it that in 10 minutes from now it will go on. So some will call that a darvish and miskavin, which means you're doing A, B will happen. It's not your goal, and it's not for sure going to happen, right? It's not your goal when you open your fridge to make the motor go on, and it's not for sure going to happen. That would be Reb Shimon would hold that's okay, which is why we are allowed to open our fridges on Shabbos as long as it's not for sure going to happen. Now, some people say you're allowed to keep the fridge open. Others say, hold on a second, but if you open your fridge and you're keeping it open for 10 minutes because you're looking through the whole fridge or something, you know for sure it's going to turn on the engine sometime there. So some will say that you would have to open and close it quickly. So it's not for sure. Others say, no, once you open it, it wasn't for sure going to happen. So if you keep it open, you didn't do anything more. So lots of interesting discussions about this. Yes, Abraham.
Is that why we're allowed to use water coolers, water fountains? Because we don't know.
Direct cause and effect.
Say it again?
As long as you're not doing a direct cause and effect.
Like the water coolers we have in shul, we don't know that it's going to cool the water when we use them?
I would like to say yes. Honestly, my experience has been otherwise, though. I've never turned on the water fountain in shul and not had the engine go on a second later. So once I saw that was happening, I don't know. I have to ask where to say this. Once I saw, I've never successfully turned on the water cooler in shul without the engine turning on a second later. So I don't know why that would be okay. Meaning, theoretically, the permissibility. But again, I'm not ask our slatus about it. It depends on the actual mitzias, the nature of what we're dealing with.
What does the Rebbe do? Do you use the water fountain at shul?
I personally stopped doing it when I realized that it's a direct cause and effect. Again, I don't know if it's true or not. You can do your own research. It just happens to be like 5 different times I tried it, and every single time, within a second, I hear the engine going on. Now, if it's on already, I don't see any problem with that. Meaning, if it's on already, let's say the engine's running, right?
Yeah.
So then I don't see what the issue would be to take water, because you're not going to make it turn on because it's on. You can do your own research. Personally, I haven't seen it that you can actually take water without having a direct cause and effect. That would be a problem. If you try it a few times, try it during the week, I'm talking about. Try it during the week and see if there's a direct cause and effect or not. That's basically what it boils down to. If there's a direct cause and effect, that's called a davar she'ein miskaven, that's a psikresha, because it's an unintended consequence, but if it's for sure going to happen, then it's forbidden. If it's an unintended consequence and it's not for sure going to happen, then that would make it, then Reb Shimon holds okay, which is how we paskin. So basically, when you open your fridge, when you take water from the water fountain, the way to do it is, as long as you check it out during the week, and it's not a for sure going to happen, it's just a maybe, and it's not your goal to turn it on, that's where things are okay. You should also try out the water fountain to make sure that it works even without the electricity, because you want to make sure that you're not stimulating any electricity when you do it. So, I don't know, you can ask Slatus about the shul's water fountain. But you have to really try it out yourself first and see if it's a direct cause and effect, because that might make a difference to what the answer will be.
I know some years back we had a big problem with the water fountain, and somebody switched it out and said that the one we have now is more proper, but I didn't know why.
I know in general in the world it's accepted that many people will drink from water fountain in Shabbos, and because we generally view it that it's not a direct cause and effect. I would just say do your own research on the shul's one during the week, see if you can take water when it's not on, and see if it's a direct cause and effect or not. That's what I would say. At that point, you go to Reb Slatus with your research and say, listen, I turned it on 5 times and it's not a direct cause and effect, or only sometimes, then probably it'll be okay. Okay, let's see weiter. 103A3, new Mishnah. Somebody who writes 2 letters on Shabbos. Ben b'minai ben b'smala, whether you write them with your, now letter, I don't mean a letter to your mother. I'm talking about like an actual letter, right? Ben b'minai ben b'smala, whether you write it with your right hand or your left hand. Ben b'shem achad, ben b'shtei shemos, whether one character or 2 characters, meaning did you write the letter aleph twice or did you write aleph beis? So, bein mishtei hasamanios, whether with 1 or 2 inks, the cholosh in any language chayiv would be liable. The Gemara will go through this in depth. Okay, so we'll see more about this in the Gemara. Rabbi Yosef said, "Lechibu shtei oisios el mishum roishem." That which is say 2 letters are liable is on account of marking, not on account of writing. Shekain koisvin al karsha mishkan, because in the Mishkan they would write on the boards of the Mishkan Leida Eza Ben Zuga to know which one was this board's mate. So they wrote different symbols to match up the boards. We'll see in the Gemara there's going to be practical ramifications that it's an account of marking, not writing. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Matzinu shem katam shem gadol." We find a case where you can have a small name when you're trying to write a big name. You already wrote a small name on that journey while you're writing big name. Shem is Shimon. So let's say you're trying to write the word Shimon and you just wrote the Shin Mem. You already wrote the word Shem. So you're liable because you actually wrote a full name, a full word. Shmuel, or when you're trying to write the word Shmuel, just writing the Shin Mem would make you liable. Noach, if you're trying to write the word Nachar and you wrote the word Nun Ches, that's already a word. Dan mi Daniel, you're trying to write Daniel and you write the Daled Nun. Gad mi Gadiel, or Gad from Gadiel. So here you have the first 2 letters would make, since they're a name unto themselves, that's Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're liable for that. Okay, Prakti Amara, Bishlama Yaman Lechayev. I can understand that you're liable for writing with your right hand, the derech ksiva b'kaf, because that's a normal way of writing. Ela small my, why would you be biblically liable for writing with your left hand? Ha'ein derech ksiva b'kaf, that's not the normal way of writing. Remember, the rule of thumb is If you do an abnormal action, usually it knocks it down from biblical to rabbinic. So if you write with your left hand and you're not weird or abnormal like me, who's a lefty, but you're a standard righty, why would you be liable for that? You wrote it in an abnormal manner. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, "Be'iter yad shanu." You're right. The Mishnah is talking about a lefty when the Mishnah says that if you write with your left hand, you're liable. So one second. So are both cases in the Mishnah talking about a lefty? Well, if both cases talking about Mishnah lefty, meaning left and right hand, a lefty should only be liable for his left, because his left hand is like everybody else's right hand. Comes out if a lefty writes with his right hand, he should not be liable. So who is this Mishnah referring to when it says if you write with your left hand or right hand, you're liable? If it's a righty, only right hand. If it's a lefty, it should only be left hand. So who are we talking about? Rabbi said, the Mishnah is talking about somebody who's ambidextrous. He would be liable for writing with his left hand and right hand because both are normal for him. Okay, that's one way to explain it. Mishnah Rabbi Yaakov Berei de Bas Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Dor. Rabbi Yaakov said, Hamani. Who's the author of Mishnah? Rabbi Yossi. That's Rabbi Yossi. In the Amar, it says, he says the liability for writing two letters on account of marking, not on account of writing. So a righty writing with his left hand a letter is weird, but to mark things off with your other hand, that's not weird. You could make markings with your other hand. So that's Rabbi Yossi saying, since what they did in the Mishnah was just marking, not writing, even with your other hand, you'd be liable for that, because that's not abnormal. But if the latter clause of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi, Reish Alav Rabbi Yossi, that implies the first step of the Mishnah is not Rabbi Yossi. Whereas no, Kula Rabbi Yossi, the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi talking. That whole part of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Matzinu, we find, now so it comes out according to Rabbi Yossi, if you write with your other hand, that might not fall under writing, but it would fall under marking. Just a record, again, it's brought down halacha that at the end of the day, if you are forced to write on Shabbos, at least do it with your wrong hand, which again does in general make things better for us. So again, the practical case to talk about is if a person needs to go to the hospital on Shabbos, which happens, and if you're doing it for emergency, you are supposed to go, and they make you write something. So ideally, you try to get out of writing, and if that doesn't work, at least write in an abnormal manner, which would knock it down from biblical to rabbinic. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda said, Matzina, we find that writing two letters from a larger name, you might have written a small name. So that would make you liable. Seems to imply, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're only liable if you write two letters if they are a complete name. But, which means, and all his examples, by the way, are two letters of two different characters, like a shin mam, a nun chas, right? Sounds like sounds like two letters of the same character, like aleph aleph or something, would not make you liable. So, or let's say you wrote, and let's say it's a word. Let's say you wrote shin shin. Shin shin is sheish, right? 6. All of Yehuda's examples were two letters that made a word, and they're two different characters. Sounds like if you wrote two letters that are the same character, even if it's a word, you would not be liable, right? For example, the word sheish is 6, or taste is to give. Sounds like Rabbi Yehuda would not make you liable there. But the Torah says, and he will do one. So basically, the passage says, when a person will sin unintentionally, all the commandments of Hashem that may not be done, and he will do from one of them. So from one of them implies you have to do a complete malacha. So what is this passage? It's about time and he will do one. I might think you're not liable until you write the whole word that you planned. Or maybe I would think you're not liable unless he weaves the entire garment, or unless he makes entire sieve. It says even from one is liable. So it seems like even doing part of an act would make you liable. If it's just from one, I think even if you wrote only one letter, or he wove only one thread, or maybe only made one hadal eye of a sieve. Maybe I think even for that you're liable. We're now 103b1 kuf gimel and beis. The Torah teaches us one. How do you reconcile? On the one hand, it has to be a complete On the other hand, even from an act is liable. So how do you reconcile that? How is this? Eino chayev ad sheyichtav shem katan mishem gadol. So basically, he's not liable unless he writes a small name from a larger name. Shem mishima. For example, his goal is to write Shimon, but he wrote a complete name when he just wrote Shem. Shmuel, or when he's trying to write the word Shmuel, Noach Minachar, he's writing the word Nach, and he already wrote Nun Ches, Dan mit Daniel, he's writing the word Daniel and wrote Dan Dalad Nun, God Migadil, or God from Gadil. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda, this is the first opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says, Gary, I just muted you. It sounds like there's some background noises. Just unmute yourself if you wanted to say something, Gary. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if somebody wrote only letters of the same character, he is liable. Could go in Sheish, for example, Shin Shin, Sheish is 6, Tes, Rar, Gag, Chach. All these are 2 letters that have meaning. Sheish means 6, Tate means give, Rar is ooze, Gag is roof, Chach is bracelet. Okay, so here we have that Rabbi Yehuda holds 2 letters which have significance are liable even if it's the same character, which seems to contradict Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, which holds even only if it's 2 different characters that are liable. Rabbi Yossi says, is a liability here on account of writing? The accountability here is you're liable because you marked, which is what they did in the Mishkan. Because they would mark each of the boards of the Mishkan. Leda Ezahik Ben Zugai, to know what is the partner of that board. And therefore, if you're just liable for marking, there's a much higher level of liability here. If somebody scratches 1 scratch on 2 boards, or 2 scratches on 1 board. So 1 scratch on 2 boards, or 2 scratches on 1 board, you're liable for that, even if you didn't write any letters. Rabbi Yossi is extremely stringent here. Rabbi Shimon says, Pas says, and he will do 1. Yachol, I might think you're not liable. Unless you write the entire word that he planned. Or until he wove the entire garment. And unless he makes the entire sieve, it says even from 1 is liable. If it's from 1, Yachol, I might think, if you can wrote just 1 letter. Or if he wove only 1 thread. Or even if you made only 1 hadalai in the sieve, I might think you're liable. Says 1. So we have a contradiction. Do you need a full 1 or even part of 1 to make you liable? How is this? You're only liable if you did a labor that is a type which would endure. So basically, if he did a portion of his intended labor that is significant and enough to endure unto itself, that was liable. Now, this seems to be similar to an opinion we said earlier in the Brisa, which we'll discuss soon. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, now we have Rabbi Yossi holds, V'asa achas, V'asa hena. Pas says he will do 1 and he will do them. So we have 1 and then them, plural and singular. Sometimes you're liable 1 for doing many. Sometimes you'll do many and you're liable for each one of them. We'll see more about that. And by the way, we've touched on this earlier. Well, let's try to analyze this Brisa. Ketani Mia, at any rate, the Brisa teaches, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda says, even if he wrote only 2 letters of the same character, Shin and Shin, Chas and Chas, right? You're liable. And Rabbi Yehuda, all his cases in our Mishnah were 2 different characters. Seems to contradict each other. The Gemara says, Lokash, it's not a question. The Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda's own opinion. That has to be 2 different characters. As opposed to the Brisa is quoting his Rabbi's opinion. The Tanya is only in the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shemar Gamliel. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Gamliel, Afilu like Kasav Elashte Oisis Vehein Shem Achad Chayiv. Even if somebody wrote only 2 letters of the same character, he would be liable. Kigon Sheish Teis Rar Gag Chach. So it comes out Rabbi Yehuda in the name of his Rabbi Gamliel holds 2 characters that have significance of the same character liable. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah holds that it has to be 2 different characters. All right, now let's try to analyze. So now we've worked out the contradiction within Rabbi Yehuda. Let's try to work out the opinions in this Brisa. Rabbi Shimon, Hainu Tanakama. Seems like Rabbi Shimon and the Tanakama are the exact same opinion, that basically you're liable for writing any 2 letters from a longer word, even if the letters are identical. Seems like the same opinion over there. So v'chit, we're now in 103b2, by the wide columns, kuf gimel and beis. V'chit tema aleph aleph ti a'azercham ike benayu. Maybe the difference is if you wrote aleph aleph, which is the first two letters of the word, I will gird you. The Tanakama Tanakama holds aleph aleph di a'azercha loy mechayev. If you wrote just aleph aleph, when you're trying to write the word a'azercha, you're not liable because aleph aleph is not an actual word. Rabbi Shimon said, "Kivan di ise big glad toyre ba'al mechayev." Rabbi Shimon might hold since aleph aleph is a formula and a common amulet. So maybe you're liable for that. So maybe that's machlokas. If you wrote just aleph aleph, part of a larger word, aleph aleph itself doesn't have significance as a word, but you might write an amulet. Maybe that's what they argue. Lememar de Rav Shimon lechumra. Does that mean Rav Shimon is going to be the stringent opinion here that you're liable just for writing aleph aleph? Vahatanya, but we learned in a brisa. Hakodeach kol shu chaya. Somebody who drills any amount of a hole is liable. Hamigarer kol shu. Also, somebody who scrapes any amount of a pole or a parchment, which is a tolda of smoothing, any amount is liable. Hama'abed koshu, somebody who tans any amount of a hide is liable. Hatzar, by the way, does not mean necessarily any amount, means he didn't tan the whole hide, rather part of it, and we've discussed enough to make it into an amulet. We discussed this in depth a few weeks ago. Hatzar beklid tzura koshu. Somebody who engraves on a utensil, any amount of a design is liable. Shimon says, Ad sheyiktach es kulo, you're not liable unless he drills the entire hole that he planned. Ad sheyigrar es kulo, unless he scrapes the entire pole. Ad sheyabed es kulo, until he tans the entire hide. Ad sheyatzer kulo, unless he graves the entire design. So we see there Shimon is more lenient here, and he holds you're not liable for writing less than the entire word that he planned. So you can't say that he's a more stringent opinion. Here we see he's a more lenient opinion, and you have to write that whole word that he planned. So what is Rav Shimon? How is he different than the Tanakama? Al Rav Shimon ha-asal hashminan. Rather, Rav Shimon is coming to teach us this halacha, ad sheyichtayv as Hashem kulay, that he's not liable unless he writes the entire word that he originally planned. So it comes out that that's what he's saying in the first price, that he's not liable unless he does a labor that's a type which endures. Endures means that it reflects your true intent, which is writing the whole word. Can you really learn like that? V'hatanya, but we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Shimon says, "V'asa achas," and he will do one. Yachol, I might think, ad sheyichtav es Hashem kulay. I would think you're not liable until he writes the whole word that he planned. It says from one. So we see clearly, according to Hashem, even writing part of the word that you plan to write makes you liable. The Gemara says, you have to reinterpret the brisa and read it like this. As a pasuk kulay. I might think, according to Hashem, you're not liable until you write the whole pasuk, the whole verse that you intended to write. It says from one, which means even writing the word. But according to Shimon, you would have to write the whole word, not the pasuk. So according to Shimon, is much more lenient than the other opinions. You're not liable until you write the whole word that you intended to write. Rabbi Yosi says, "V'asa achas, v'asa hena." Pas says he is liable if you do one of them, or if he'll do them. So you have singular and plural liability here. There are times when you're liable to only one chatas for numerous malachas. And sometimes you're liable for each and every one of them. This should sound familiar. We've had this before. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Chanina said, "My time at Rabbi Yosi." What's Rabbi Yosi's reasoning? How does he expound this pasuk? Achas me'achas. The pasuk could have said he did one. What does it mean me'achas, from one? Hena. It could have said them. Mehena. But yet it says from them. Achas shehi hena. We learn out you have one, which is them. So you can have a singular, which is a plural, which we'll see about that. The hena shiachas. You can also have a them, which is one, which is sometimes you're liable one for doing many, and sometimes you're liable to many. What are examples of this? Achas Shimon. So one without a mem would indicate you're not liable unless you wrote the whole word. Again, mine, for example, Shimon. Me'achas, from one, shame at me, Shimon. That teaches us if you just wrote the shin mem of writing the name Shimon, you're already liable for the shin mem. Hena, them, avos, is teaching us you're liable for the primary categories of malacha. Mehena, from them, told us, teaches us even a subcategory you're liable for. Achas shehihena, and this we've had before. If you did one, which is them, you're liable. So zidain Shabbos v'shigas malachos. So if you did one mistake, you can be liable for many, which means zidain Shabbos v'shigas malachos. If you were deliberate regarding Shabbos, but you forgot each malacha is forbidden. So remember, we've had there that you're liable to each and every one that you did. Heina shiachas, as opposed to them, which is one. Shigas Shabbos is a done malachos. If you knew these malachas were forbidden, but you forgot today was Shabbos, so there you're only liable to one. So remember, we've had this before. Depends on what you forgot as to your level of liability. If you did 10 different malachas, right? So if you knew the malachas are forbidden, but you forgot today was Shabbos, then you're only liable to one, because you got one forgetfulness. You forgot today was Shabbos. If you knew today was Shabbos, but you forgot each of these malachas was forbidden, then you're liable to each one of them. All right, we'll stop here for today. Any questions?
No.
Let me just read for a minute of the Shabbos kitchen, and then we'll get to Andy.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like I lost my place in the Shabbos kitchen. Anybody know where we're up to? Actually, I'll get it. We're on page 32. Okay, so we've discussed the halachas of a kli ratio in the first vessel. Basically, the first vessel that was heated up on the fire, either whether it's still in the fire or not, as long as it's still yad soledisbo, the halachas of cooking do apply. Then you poured it into a second vessel, so the stream of pouring has the ability to cook as well, at least the outer surface of what it's hitting. Then when it's in the second vessel, so there we had a kli sheni. For some things it can cook, but it has 4 different leniencies. Now we're going to discuss if you pour from the second vessel into a third vessel. So the laws of kli shlishi, the third vessel. Hot food, page 32. Hot food or liquid transferred from a kli sheni, a second vessel, to a third vessel. So the third one is the kli shlishi. Once transferred to a kli shlishi, liquids do not retain the capacity to cook most foods. Therefore, it is generally permissible to immerse any raw or cooked food in a kli shlishi, even if the hot water of the kli shlishi is yad soledisbo. So if you took your water from your urn and you put it into a second cup, and from there you pour into a third cup, that third cup, it can be still hot, and you can burn your hand if you stick it in, but it has many leniencies already. There are, however, several foods so sensitive to heat that they can become cooked even in a kli shlishi. These are tea leaves, eggs, and extremely salty fish, which is unfit to be eaten due to its saltiness. It is forbidden to heat these items by pouring on them the liquids of a kli sheni or by immersing them in a kli shlishi. Furthermore, even if hot liquids are transferred to a fourth or fifth vessel, it is forbidden to heat these 3 items in them, as long as the liquid is yad soledisbo, as long as it's still hot, which is at least 110 degrees. It is considered capable of cooking tea leaves, eggs, and salted fish. It is therefore prohibited to use tea bags on Shabbos, as the tea leaves become cooked by the hot water unless the water is first cooled below yad soledisbo. All other foods, however, may be heated in a kli shlishi. Summary: all foods, whether raw or cooked, may be heated in a kli shlishi, or by liquids poured on them from a kli sheni, except eggs, tea leaves, and salted fish, which may never be heated with a liquid that is yad soledisbo. All right, so in general rule of thumb is, if you want to keep things safe, just do things in a kli shlishi. And again, unless you're dealing with these 3 things, the tea bags, the eggs, or the salted fish, you're generally safe if you do things in a kli shlishi. If you want to do things in a kli sheni, there are many things you could do, but then you just really have to be knowledgeable to make sure that it fits within the parameters of what you're allowed to do in a kli sheni. When you deal with a kli rishon, whether it's on the fire or off the fire, we don't want any cooking happening over there, because that still has the potential to cook.
So when you pour from a kli rishon, don't you have the issue of irui, but you don't have that issue on a kli sheni?
Yeah, so if you're something that you're allowed to cook in a kli sheni, but you're not allowed to cook in a kli rishon, you'll have to put it in after you pour the water into the kli sheni, not before.
I mean, the kli shlishi. I mean, if you can't cook it in a sheni, when you're pouring it out of the sheni, isn't that irui when it's going into the shlishi?
Excellent question. So that was one of the 4 leniencies we had by kli sheni. that the pouring stream of the Kli Sheni already takes on the status of a Kli Shlishi. Excellent. So by the halachas of pouring, it's complicated. When you're pouring from a first vessel to a second vessel, that stream has the status of the first vessel. When you're pouring from a second vessel to a third vessel, that stream has the status of the third vessel. It's complicated, but yeah, since anyways the second vessel is an iffy situation, we apply this leniency that we can give it the status, the stream is the status of the third vessel. So those things that you can cook in a second vessel, make sure you're not having the stream of water from the first vessel hitting them, because that's called a first vessel. So yes, absolutely. Andy?
Unmute myself. Rabbi,
Yeah.
we're going into some more issues of the rewards that we get for acts of kindness. And at the end of this, in a couple of minutes, I have some very serious questions about this that I'd like to pose to you. Anyway, rewards for kindness. Kindness arouses Hashem's mercy. Kindness arouses Hashem's mercy even after the merit of our forefathers has been exhausted. These days, harsh judgments abound across the world. The only way to protect ourselves from the hardships that arise each day is to strengthen ourselves in the pursuit of kind deeds and thereby arouse the attribute of kindness in heaven. The greatness of a kind deed and its reward. Kindness contributes toward the redemption of Klal Yisrael. Kindness is equivalent to all the karbanos. Charity and kindness are equivalent to all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Rain falls in the merit of kindness. Through kindness, a person can be spared from a decree of death by heaven. Kind deeds protect from the Yetzer Hara. When a Jew toils in Torah study and kind deeds, he controls his Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara does not control him. Torah purifies the mind so that it will not be plagued by foolish notions. Kind deeds purify the body so that the Yetzer Hara cannot easily draw it towards sin. Now, my question, Rabbi, is acts of kindness a lot of times come randomly. I'm just thinking about like a situation arises where you can walk an old lady across the street or something like that. Those kind of things come randomly, and it's hard to recognize them sometimes till the moment for the act of kindness has passed. There are some things like giving of charity that is always available to do. But it is the learn. And I've been for quite some time. I've been applying myself to the serious study of Torah, the Daf Yomi and other things. But is it kind of like not complete? The action of learning Torah is not complete if not done with acts of kindness. And the other thing is like something like giving of charity. If you can give $1,000 for a certain thing and you give 100, is that a complete act of kindness, or is that like wasted motion? And the same thing, if you can only give 100 but you give 500, is that an act of kindness? That's not really an act of kindness. I open that up.
First of all, they're not contingent on each other. Every act of tzedakah you do is a mitzvah unto itself. And when you learn Torah, that's a mitzvah unto itself. I don't think we find that there's like a contingency over here. If I give $1 to tzedakah, I just did a mitzvah of tzedakah. Now let's just say I can give $1,000. So each time I give tzedakah, that's a mitzvah tzedakah. The Rambam says every time you do an act of giving charity, that's a mitzvah. As a matter of fact, the Rambam says you're better off giving $1 100 times than giving $100.
That's not the question. If you totally can give $1,000 and you're not giving the $1,000, you're giving $100. Let's say annually, you give less than what you're supposed to, or what you could.
Every time you give, you're doing the mitzvah of tzedakah. Now, there's a separate
If
thing.
you're a millionaire and you give $1 that year, was that a mitzvah or was that an avera?
Two accountabilities. There's two separate calculations. Did you do the mitzvah of tzedakah? Yes, you did a mitzvah of tzedakah. Did you fulfill your obligation of doing meiser kisafim, which is of tithing your money? Or were there times that you may have transgressed the mitzvah? You may have passed over the positive commandment. It means it's a positive commandment to give tzedakah, right? Every time you do it, you get a mitzvah. There may be times that you did it, and there may be times that you negated the mitzvah. So you may have done 100 good mitzvahs, and you may have passed up on 100 mitzvahs. It's like any time, we always have to do things right and things wrong, right? So every time you give charity, you gave the mitzvah tzedakah, but if there were other times that a poor person came to your door and you turned them away, so these times you negated the mitzvah tzedakah. So it's not like all or nothing. You did 10 mitzvahs.
Wait. You say you negated the mitzvah? Does that mean like it's an anti-mitzvah?
Well, there's a concept of a bittul.
It takes away the good mitzvah you did?
Oh, no. 1 second. Let me give you an example. Let's say the mitzvah of eating on sukkahs, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say on sukkahs, I ate in the sukkah 5 times, and 5 times I ate out of the sukkah. So I performed 5 positive mitzvahs, and I negated 5 mitzvahs, right?
Well, you say negated. It took away those.
Not negating my previous mitzvah, but I passed up on a mitzvah that I should. It's called a bittul essay. Bittul essay.
In what category does that go into?
You broke a positive.
What do you call a negated mitzvah?
Not
an avera. It's not a mitzvah.
The sin that you broke a positive commandment. You were supposed to do a positive commandment, and you broke it. For example, you're supposed to put on tefillin, and you don't, right? Or so you negated a positive mitzvah. It doesn't mean you negated in your past. It negated right now you had a positive mitzvah that presented itself to you, and that positive mitzvah, that one you broke. So you may have you fulfilled 5 positive, and you broke 5 positive. It doesn't mean the two are 2 separate calculations though. So you performed tzedakah 5 times, and 5 times you messed up on tzedakah, let's say.
And is it the same thing with the study of Torah? I'm getting from the Chafetz Chaim that it's like an incomplete. If you study Torah without acts of kindness, then you're only getting half of the benefit. I mean, there's a benefit. Acts of kindness, obviously, there's like, I need a little help. I need some money in the bank, so to speak. It's like, and I also think we learned in a Gemara that you can challenge God about giving charity.
Yeah, it says that.
Say, I'm giving it, but I want a reward for it.
You can, you could challenge Hashem that there's a concept that you don't lose out by giving charity. So that you could challenge Hashem, specifically regarding tithing your money. Regarding learning Torah, every word of Torah, by the way,
right?
Mitzvah. So when we learn Daf Yomi, we're getting thousands of mitzvahs for this hour. Just want to point that out there because every single word of Torah is a mitzvah. Ideally, you take the mitzvah and then put it into action, but that doesn't negate the fact that you learned the Torah. It's just how to take it to the next level. Just a record, they say the greatest chesed is if the something called Torah's chesed. If you can combine your Torah with chesed, that's even the greater level, which would mean if you could take something from Daf Yomi and teach it to somebody else. So there you're doing both at the same time because you're doing Torah and you're doing kindness by bringing others closer to Torah. So if you can stay over some of Daf Yomi to somebody else, you'll actually get both. But either way, it doesn't negate your Torah study. It's not a contingency. Every word we learn the Torah is a mitzvah. If you want to then take it to the next level and make it even more impactful, that would be if you then turn it into chesed or bring it into action.
And what about this part that he says that Torah purifies the mind, but kind deeds purify the body? Can you elaborate on that? That's kind of scary.
Well, Torah is more intellectual, right? You're not using there's two different aspects that we're dealing with. Torah is more learning words, so that goes into our mind, so that purifies our mind. And when we do acts of kindness, we use our body for that. We do have another concept, though, that Torah really does go throughout your whole body as well. The Gemara says that if a person has challenges coming upon them, they should try to figure out what they did wrong with that limb that is being sick, right? And if you can't find anything out with that limb that's making you sick, then you can attribute it to the fact that you were not learning Torah diligently and sufficiently, because there is something about it that does encompass your whole body. But at the end of the day, if you want to break up the two, kindness is done with your body and Torah is done with your mind. So Torah will be purifying your mind and kindness will be purifying your body.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much time, but we're past the halfway point in this safer. But the more I read it, it's kind of serious stuff. It's not kind of. It's like life and death serious. Thank you.
I think if you want to take this to the next level, try to take something you learn every day from Daf Yomi and say it over to somebody else. Even if it takes 30 seconds, that will be actually combining both. That's called Torah's Chesed. Because remember, teaching Torah to somebody else is called kindness, right? The greatest kindness.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The greatest kindness you could do to somebody is introduce them to their heritage and bring them closer to their position in life. So the Chafetz Chaim says one of the greatest favors you could do to somebody is introduce them to the beauty of Torah or teach them Torah, because that's the biggest favor you could do to them, because that's bringing them closer to.
Don't we have to be a little careful, because who you teach Torah to and how you teach it, it could turn them off as well as turn them on to Torah.
Do it in a way
That's a very big challenge that I'm always afraid of. I forget about that.
I think you're up to it. I think we're up to the challenge. Just use our to think about it. Use our intellect. I think we could all do it. You don't have to be a rabbi to introduce others to the beauty of Torah. If you go to Daf Yomi or something, and anything, if you go to a class and you learn something inspiring, you should share that with others. You don't have to be a rabbi for
Not
that.
without the permission of your Rebbe, and you've given us your permission.
Use your intellect, use your judgment when to do it. I trust everybody here is smart enough and to do it. I think everybody here has the ability to share Torah on some level with others. So just use your judgment. I don't have any concerns.
Hello?
Yes?
So we went into phase 2 last night. I don't know if you saw the email. When is it possible maybe we can go into phase 2 with the Daf Yomi Shir?